Welcome back to Military Report Mode, where we dissect the most critical military maneuvers and geopolitical flashpoints on the planet. Today we are taking you inside a terrifying display of overwhelming American maritime power that just sent absolute shockwaves through the highest command echelons in Tehran. For years, the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has operated under a dangerous manufactured illusion. They believed that by stockpiling thousands of cheap, unguided rockets, deploying swarms of fiberglass fast attack boats, and heavily mining the shallow, restrictive waters of the Strait of Hormuz, they could effectively deny the United States military access to the Persian Gulf. They believed they had established a permanent, impenetrable anti-access and area denial perimeter. But at dawn today, the United States Navy and the United States Marine Corps completely shattered that illusion, delivering a masterclass in power projection that left Iranian radar operators staring at their screens in pure, unadulterated panic. The horizon line off the coast of the Arabian Peninsula literally darkened as an unprecedented, heavily armed American armada breached the territorial threshold of the Gulf. This was not a standard, routine freedom of navigation patrol. This was a massive, integrated amphibious readiness group, serving as the vanguard for a fully mobilized Marine Expeditionary Brigade. At the absolute center of this terrifying naval formation sailed two colossal titans of the sea, the USS Tripoli and the USS Iwo Jima. To call these vessels amphibious assault ships is a massive geopolitical understatement, displacing over 40,000 tons each. With towering superstructures and massive, flat, rectangular flight decks stretching hundreds of feet long, they are, for all tactical intents and purposes, incredibly lethal medium-sized aircraft carriers. And they were not sailing alone. They were escorted by a heavily armed screen of Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers and Ticonderoga-class cruisers, their Aegis combat systems radiating invisible domes of impenetrable electromagnetic protection across the entire maritime battlespace. But the true terror for the Iranian military command was not just the ships themselves. It was the devastating, highly specialized cargo they carried in their steel bellies. Between the two massive assault ships and their supporting dock landing vessels, the United States had just parked 5,500 elite, heavily armed and hyper-aggressive United States Marines right on Iran's doorstep. The strategic capabilities of this specific deployment are precisely what caused the panic in Tehran. The USS Tripoli is an America-class amphibious assault ship, heavily optimized for absolute aviation dominance. Its reinforced flight deck was completely packed with a terrifying aviation combat element. Squadrons of F-35B Lightning II stealth fighters sat hooked to the deck, their advanced lift fans tested and ready for short takeoff and vertical landing operations. These fifth-generation fighters can penetrate the most advanced Iranian air defense networks completely undetected, delivering laser-guided munitions to subterranean command bunkers before the enemy even knows an aircraft is in the sky. Sitting alongside the stealth fighters were dozens of MV-22 Ospreys, massive tilt-rotor aircraft capable of taking off like helicopters and flying at the extreme speed of a turboprop airplane, designed to carry heavily armed Marines deep behind enemy coastlines in a matter of minutes. Trailing just behind the Tripoli was the USS Iwo Jima, a Wasp-class amphibious assault ship. While it also boasts a massive flight deck loaded with AH-1Z Viper attack helicopters and heavy-lift CH-53 King Stallions, the true lethality of the Iwo Jima lies beneath the waterline. Inside the massive, floodable well deck in the lower stern of the ship, the Marine Corps had assembled a mechanized nightmare. Hovering on massive cushions of air were multiple Landing Craft Air Cushion, or LCAC, hovercrafts. These massive, gas turbine-powered beasts can skim across the surface of the ocean at over 40 knots, carrying heavy amphibious combat vehicles, high-mobility artillery rocket systems, and hundreds of combat-ready infantrymen directly from the horizon straight onto a hostile beach, completely bypassing traditional ports and coastal minefields. As this massive American armada entered the narrow, highly contested choke point of the Strait of Hormuz, the tactical tension was absolutely suffocating. The waterway here is less than 21 miles wide. The massive American warships were sailing well within the visual and physical striking range of Iranian coastal anti-ship cruise missile batteries. Inside the combat information centers of the American destroyers, the radar screens lit up. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, desperate to project strength and gauge the American posture, immediately deployed a massive swarm of heavily armed Bagamar fast attack patrol boats. Dozens of the small, highly maneuverable fiberglass boats, armed with dual-mounted heavy machine guns and unguided rocket pods, surged out from the Iranian coastline. They moved in chaotic, aggressive swarm formations, intentionally violating international maritime protocols, attempting to close the distance and harass the massive American warships. It was a classic asymmetric intimidation tactic that Iran had used for decades to bully commercial oil tankers, but the United States Marine Corps does not get intimidated. The response from the Amphibious Readiness Group was instantaneous, overwhelmingly disproportionate, and terrifyingly precise. The strike group commander did not even bother firing the ship-mounted 20mm phalanx cannons or the heavy Mark 38 chain guns. He decided to send a much clearer, vertical message. On the flight deck of the USS Tripoli, the deafening roar of Pratt & Whitney F-135 turbofan engines echoed across the water. In a display of absolute uncontested air superiority, a flight of 4 F-35B stealth fighters executed a vertical takeoff. They hovered momentarily above the deck, suspended on columns of superheated thrust, before transitioning into forward flight and aggressively sweeping low over the approaching Iranian swarm. The sheer concussive sonic force of the stealth fighters passing just hundreds of feet above the water physically shook the Iranian patrol boats. Simultaneously, from the deck of the USS Iwo Jima, a flight of AH-1Z Viper attack helicopters lifted off. Heavily armed with 20mm rotary cannons and pods of AGM-114 Hellfire missiles, the Vipers did not simply fly over. They aggressively established an armed overwatch perimeter, placing their targeting lasers directly onto the hulls of the lit Iranian fast attack craft. The Iranian radar warning receivers inside their boats instantly began screaming, indicating they were completely painted by American targeting systems. The message was unmistakable. You are currently in the crosshairs, and we are simply waiting for an excuse to pull the trigger. The psychological impact on the Iranian fast attack crews was absolute. The swarm immediately lost its cohesion. The boat commanders, realizing with horrifying clarity that they were seconds away from being completely vaporized by fifth-generation stealth fighters and heavy attack helicopters, aggressively cut their throttles. They sharply turned their vessels around, fleeing back toward the safety of their hidden coastal inlets at maximum speed. But the American show of force was not over. As the massive armada continued its relentless, unstoppable transit through the Strait of Hormuz, the rear well deck of the USS Iwo Jima slowly opened. The deafening roar of massive gas turbines echoed across the dark water as two LSEC hovercrafts emerged from the belly of the ship, kicking up massive clouds of sea spray. They were completely loaded with heavily armored marine combat vehicles and high-mobility artillery rocket systems. They did not head for the shore, but they aggressively skimmed the perimeter of the strike group, demonstrating the immediate, terrifying capability of the United States to launch a heavy, mechanized amphibious invasion force at a moment's notice. Deep inside the subterranean command bunkers in Tehran, the Supreme National Security Council watched the drone feeds and satellite telemetry in stunned, paralyzed silence. Their entire strategic doctrine, built on the assumption that they could deny the United States Navy access to the Persian Gulf, had just been completely dismantled in broad daylight. The deployment of the USS Tripoli, the USS Iwo Jima, and 5,500 elite United States Marines was not just a naval transit. It was a loaded gun pointed directly at the Iranian coastline. The United States had just flawlessly demonstrated that it can park an entire, self-sustaining, multi-domain invasion force right on the doorstep of its adversaries, daring them to make a move. The Strait of Hormuz was no longer a choke point controlled by the Revolutionary Guard. It had been forcibly transformed into an American maritime highway. The panic in Tehran is entirely justified. They are completely outgunned, completely outmaneuvered, and staring down the barrel of the most lethal, highly integrated amphibious assault force in the history of human warfare. Keep your eyes on this region and stay locked on Military Report Mode for the absolute latest strategic analysis.